I had always been drawn to abandoned places, the forgotten remnants of a bygone era. So, when I heard about an abandoned hotel deep in the forest, I knew I had to see it for myself. It was said to be one of the most beautiful hotels in the world, but it had been left to rot for decades, abandoned by all who knew of its existence. I set out on my journey, determined to uncover the secrets of the abandoned hotel. It was a long hike through the dense forest, but I finally stumbled upon the entrance. The grand entrance was overgrown with vines, and the door hung off its hinges, but I pushed it open and stepped inside. The inside of the hotel was just as grand as the entrance, with high ceilings and elaborate moldings, but it was also in a state of decay. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung from the chandeliers. I made my way through the lobby and up to the first floor, where I found a room with a large window that overlooked the forest. I sat down on the windowsill and took in my surroundings. The sun was starting to set, and the forest was bathed in a golden light. But as I gazed out the window, I noticed something moving in the shadows. At first, I thought it was just an animal, but as I watched, I realized that the shadows were moving in a strange and unnatural way. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I was not alone in the abandoned hotel. I quickly gathered my things and made my way back down to the lobby, but as I turned a corner, I saw a figure standing in front of me. It was a tall, slender figure, with long arms that seemed to stretch on forever. I froze, not knowing what to do. And then, the figure spoke. Its voice was low and raspy, and it whispered, "You shouldn't have come here." I turned to run, but the figure was faster. It reached out and grabbed me, its long fingers wrapping around my arm. I screamed, but the figure only tightened its grip. And then, everything went black. I woke up in a dimly lit room, tied to a chair. The figure was standing in front of me, its green eyes gleaming in the darkness. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure reached out and touched my cheek, and I felt a cold, icy shock run through my body. The figure told me the story of the abandoned hotel. It had been built in the late 1800s, and it was the most luxurious hotel in the world. But one day, a group of travelers disappeared, and the hotel was abandoned. The figure told me that the travelers had been taken by a group of creatures that lived in the forest. These creatures were said to be immortal and to possess powers beyond human comprehension. The figure went on to explain that it was one of these creatures, and that it had been waiting for someone to come to the abandoned hotel. It told me that I was going to be its next victim, and that I would never leave the hotel alive. I was terrified, but I refused to give up. I managed to break free from the ropes that were binding me, and I ran through the hotel, determined to find a way out. I encountered more of the creatures along the way, but I managed to evade them. Finally, I stumbled upon a staircase that led to the roof. I burst onto the roof, and I was greeted by the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. The sun had risen and the sky was a brilliant shade of orange and pink. But my joy was short-lived, as I soon realized that I was surrounded by the creatures. They were closing in on me, their green eyes gleaming in the light of the rising sun. I was trapped, with nowhere to run. But then, I remembered the stories that I had heard about the creatures. They were said to be afraid of light, and so I grabbed a piece of metal from the roof and used it to reflect the light of the sun into their eyes. The creatures recoiled in fear, and I seized the opportunity to run. I didn't stop until I was out of the forest and back on the main road. I never looked back, and I never spoke of my experience in the abandoned hotel again. But sometimes, in the still of the night, I hear a voice that whispers to me, "You shouldn't have come here." And I am filled with fear and regret, for I know that the abandoned hotel still holds its secrets and that the creatures are waiting for their next victim. When I was in my early 20s, my date and I decided to go to the Sail Inn in West Sacramento to play pool. We'd been there before and enjoyed speaking with the bartender. I can't recall her name, but she was a beautiful, engaging woman. This particular night, we walked in and noticed the pool table was occupied. There was a man and woman shooting a game, so my date bought us some drinks while I watched. After a few minutes, the man noticed me and struck up a conversation with me. When my date came over with our drinks, the man asked us if we wanted to shoot a game with them. It didn't occur to me at the time that his female companion hadn't yet said anything. We said yes, so he racked up the balls, and we played against them. During the game, we introduced ourselves, and right after the man began asking me some personal questions that started to bother me, like where did I live, had my date and I been dating long, did we live together, etc. I noticed the man and his friend kept looking at each other. I became increasingly uncomfortable, even though the rest of the conversation was benign and pleasant in nature. Weirdly, the woman still hadn't said anything. When the game was over, the man asked us if we wanted to leave with them to go to another bar down the street. At first I didn't say anything. The guy asked us again, saying they discovered a cool bar not too far from where we were. My date and I looked at each other, and before he could say anything, I blurted out, "No thanks, we have dinner plans." We in fact did not have plans, but my date didn't argue with me. I think he saw the look of panic on my face. We both grabbed our jackets and got the hell out of there. By the time we walked out the door, the hair was literally standing up on the back of my neck. When we got back to my truck, my date asked me what was wrong. I told him I got a horrible feeling from those people and just knew we had to get away from them. I told him it was weird that he asked us to leave with them when he didn't check with his date first. He shrugged and said okay. I think he thought I was crazy. A few days later, when I opened up the afternoon paper, there was an article in there about a woman from West Sacramento who'd been found murdered. I didn't think anything of it until I got to the page where the article was continued, and the picture of the woman practically leapt off the page at me. It was the beautiful bartender from the Sail Inn. Apparently she'd been kidnapped, raped, and killed the very night I was there with my date. I was totally creeped out and thought what a crazy coincidence that was, and how sad it was that she had died so horribly. It wasn't until a month or so later that I realized why I had gotten so upset that night. A man and woman had just been arrested for the bartender's murder, along with the murders of several other people, four of whom were couples. There on the front page of the Sacramento Bee were the pictures of the killers, Gerald and Charlene Gallego, the very couple who invited my date and I to go with them to another bar. And apparently, this was one of the ruses they used to get their victims into their van. My heart did flip-flops in my chest as I read the article. Not only had we been targeted as their next serial killer victims, when we turned them down, they selected another target because of me. I have lived with both relief and guilt all my life because of this. Intellectually, I know it's not my fault the bartender died, but I've always wondered how different the world would have been had she been able to live out her life, even though I would have been gone myself. Needless to say, that was the end of my bar day experiences for a long, long, long time. I always knew that I was different from others. I had a strange habit of getting lost in my thoughts, and it often felt like I was living in a parallel world, one that was far from reality. But I never thought it would become my worst nightmare. It started innocently enough. I was walking home from work, lost in my thoughts as usual, when I heard a strange noise. It was a low growl, almost like an animal, coming from the darkness of the alleyway beside me. I stopped and peered into the shadows, trying to see what was making the noise. That's when I saw it. A pair of glowing red eyes, staring right at me. I felt a wave of fear wash over me, and I turned to run, but something was different this time. My body wouldn't respond. It was as if I was frozen in place, unable to move or speak. And then, the growling grew louder, and a figure stepped out of the darkness. It was a monster, unlike anything I had ever seen before. Its skin was a sickly green, and its eyes were large and glowing red. Its mouth was filled with razor-sharp teeth, and it was easily twice the size of a man. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak, as the monster slowly approached me. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished into thin air. I was left standing there, shaking and confused, wondering if I had just imagined the whole thing. But I knew deep down that I hadn't. Something was happening to me, and it was getting worse. The next day, I found myself lost in my thoughts again, but this time it was different. I couldn't seem to escape them. It was like I was trapped inside my own mind, with no way out. And then, the hallucinations started. Everywhere I went, I saw strange creatures lurking in the shadows, watching me with their glowing red eyes. I tried to ignore them, but it was no use. They were always there, always watching me. I became a prisoner in my own mind, unable to escape the horrors that lurked in the darkness. I tried to tell others about what was happening to me, but they just looked at me like I was crazy. No one believed me. And then, one day, it all became too much to bear. I found myself in a dark alley, surrounded by the monsters I had seen before. I was trapped, with no way out. And then, the worst thing of all happened. One of the creatures stepped forward, and it spoke to me. "I am the master of your mind," it said in a voice that was both guttural and terrifying. "You belong to me now." And then, I was no longer in control of my own mind. I was a prisoner, trapped inside my own thoughts, unable to escape the horrors that lurked within. Every day was a never-ending nightmare, filled with fear and terror. But then, one day, I woke up and realized that it was all just a dream. Or was it? To this day, I am still not sure what was real and what was just a figment of my imagination. But one thing is for certain, the experience has changed me forever. I am no longer the person I once was, for I have become a prisoner in my own mind.